Number 12. Flageolet Beans, the elegant Frenchman. A cooked cup gives about 14 grams of protein and 12 grams of fiber, and they hold a delicate pale green that survives cooking, which almost no other bean manages. They are ordinary kidney beans harvested while still immature and dried in the shade to preserve the color, a technique a French breeder developed in the 1840s. In France, they are the traditional partner to lamb. If food has begun to taste flat, if nothing much appeals and you eat because you should rather than because you want to, flageolets are worth the small extra cost. They are noticeably more delicate than a pinto or a kidney, and a plate that looks and tastes like something worth eating is not a luxury when appetite is fading. Taste and smell both dull with age, and beautiful food does real work against that. Harvesting a bean while immature keeps more of certain plant compounds intact, and the shade drying that preserves the color also preserves chlorophyll and some polyphenols that sun-drying degrades. The nutritional gap between a flageolet and a mature kidney bean is small and mostly a matter of texture rather than measurable advantage, so the honest case for this bean is culinary rather than clinical. The protein and fiber are simply solid. Cook them for about an hour and finish with a spoon of cream, thyme, and finely chopped shallot. They are the priciest bean here at roughly $4 a pound, so treat them as the Sunday bean rather than the weekday one. You can grow them yourself simply by picking any kidney bean pod early and drying it out of the sun. The next one climbs 15 feet, flowers bright scarlet, and most people plant it without realizing they can eat it. Number 13. Scarlet Runner Beans, the ornamental secret. The dried seed gives you about 15 grams of protein a cooked cup, and it is enormous, glossy black flecked with violet, the size of a thumbnail. Half the gardeners in Britain grow this plant purely for the flowers and never once eat the mature beans. It came from the highlands of Central America, where it grows as a perennial and lives for years from the same root. If your knees or back have made ground-level gardening painful, this is the crop that grows at chest height. It climbs a frame to well over head height, which means picking without kneeling, and it crops from mid-summer until the first frost. For anyone who has had to give up vegetable beds, a single runner bean frame against a fence returns a surprising amount of food for very little bending. Like every bean here, runner beans host bacteria in their roots that pull nitrogen out of the air and fix it into the soil, which is why they need almost no feeding. The mature dried seed carries the same protein and fiber profile as other common beans, with a notably high potassium content. Like all beans in this family, they must be cooked thoroughly, as the raw seed contains the same compound that makes raw kidney beans unsafe. Let the pods dry brown on the vine, shell them, then soak overnight and boil hard for 10 minutes before simmering an hour. Seed costs about $3 a packet, and one packet plants a whole frame, which makes this the cheapest bean on the list if you count what it yields. Save your own seed each year and you never buy it again. The next bean is the one Mexican cooks reach for when they want butter without butter. Number 14. Mayocoba Beans, also sold as Peruano or Canary beans, the golden creamer. A cooked cup carries about 15 grams of protein and 12 grams of fiber for roughly 45 cents, and they cook to a texture that people consistently describe as buttery. They are pale yellow, thin-skinned, and originally Peruvian, though Mexico grows most of what reaches North American shelves. They were the subject of a famous patent dispute in the 1990s when an American company tried to claim ownership of a bean Mexico had grown for centuries. If you are recovering from something, an operation, a chest infection, a hard winter, this is a protein that goes down when very little else will. The skins are thin enough that they almost disappear, which matters if your digestion is fragile or your appetite has collapsed. Protein need actually rises during recovery, exactly when the ability to eat is lowest, and a food this soft bridges that gap. Mayocoba beans carry a similar protein and mineral profile to other common beans, with a notably thin seed coat, which means less of the insoluble fiber that irritates sensitive guts. The general research on legumes applies here as it does across the family, since these are all varieties of the same species. The practical difference is digestibility rather than nutrition on paper, and for a great many older people, digestibility is the deciding factor. Simmer for about 90 minutes with garlic, then mash them roughly with olive oil and a little of their cooking liquid until they are the texture of soft mashed potato. They cost around $2 a pound dried and are increasingly stocked in ordinary supermarkets. They grow as a compact bush plant in warm conditions. The next one is a bean so tough that it feeds people where nothing else will grow. Number 15, Pigeon Peas, the drought survivor. A cooked cup carries about 11 grams of protein and 11 grams of fiber, the lowest protein figure on this list, but still more than most people get at breakfast. The plant is a woody shrub rather than a vine. It lives for several years, and it produces a crop through droughts that kill everything around it. India grows the most. The Caribbean built rice and peas around it, and East Africa depends on it in bad years. If your food budget has to stretch further every month, the honest lesson of this bean is about resilience rather than nutrition. It exists because people needed a food that would arrive when nothing else did, and it is worth knowing that the cheapest end of the bean shelf is not the compromise it feels like. 11 grams of protein for 30 cents is still a better deal than almost anything in a packet. Pigeon peas fix nitrogen unusually well and are often planted between other crops specifically to feed the soil, which is why smallholder agriculture research pays them so much attention. Nutritionally, they sit slightly below the common beans on protein, but carry comparable fiber, folate, and potassium. Because they are eaten across South Asia, the Caribbean, and Africa, the food security literature on them is extensive, even though clinical trials are few. Cook them for about an hour, or buy them tinned for under $1, and cook them with rice, coconut milk, and thyme in the Caribbean way. Dried, they run about $2 a pound in South Asian and Caribbean shops, where they are usually labeled tourdal or gungo peas. The shrub needs a long, warm season. The next bean survives on desert rainfall alone, and it may be the most remarkable plant in this entire video. Number 16, Tepary Beans, the desert bean. A cooked cup delivers about 16 grams of protein and a very high fiber content, and this bean produces a harvest on less water than any other legume farmed anywhere. The Tohono O'odham and other peoples of the Sonoran Desert have grown it for at least 4,000 years on nothing but seasonal rain. It very nearly disappeared in the 20th century and survived because a handful of seed keepers refused to let it go. If blood sugar is something you now have to think about at every meal, this is a bean worth knowing by name. Tepary beans digest slowly, even by the standards of legumes, and the traditional communities that ate them have long been studied for exactly this reason. It is one of the few foods where the historical record and the nutritional analysis point in the same direction. Research into Sonoran desert foods, including Tepary beans, has examined their slow digestibility and high soluble fiber in the context of the very high rates of type 2 diabetes in the region after traditional diets were displaced. The findings are suggestive rather than conclusive, and no single bean explains a community's health. What the analysis does show clearly is a dense, slowly digested protein and fiber package. They need a long soak and a slow simmer of up to 2 hours because they are dense, and they are best cooked simply with chili and oregano. They cost more, around $6 a pound, from the small farms and seed conservancies that grow them, which is the price of keeping a nearly lost crop alive. Right after this, a bean from West Africa that quietly does something almost no plant food can do on its own. Number 17, Bambara Groundnuts, the complete one. A cooked cup gives you roughly 16 grams of protein, and unlike almost every other bean, that protein contains all 9 essential amino acids in useful proportion, which is the definition of a complete protein. The plant buries its own pods underground like a peanut, and West African women have farmed it for centuries as a crop that feeds a family when the harvest fails. It is the 3rd most important legume in much of Africa and almost unknown everywhere else. If your meals have narrowed to the same few things, which happens to almost everyone as cooking gets harder, protein quality starts to matter as much as protein quantity. Most beans are low in one amino acid, methionine, which is why the old advice was always to eat beans with grains. Bambara does not need the pairing, which makes it genuinely useful for anyone whose diet has become repetitive. Nutritional analyses of Bambara groundnut consistently report a more balanced amino acid profile than common beans, with enough methionine that it does not depend on being combined with cereal. It also carries a higher fat content than other legumes, which makes it more calorie-dense, and that is an advantage rather than a drawback for anyone struggling to maintain weight. Research interest has grown considerably as a climate-resilient crop. They are very hard and need soaking overnight and boiling for 2 hours or so, and they are traditionally eaten as a thick porridge or roasted whole. Look for them in West African grocers, usually under the name Bambara or Okpa, at around $5 a pound. Right after this, the 3 beans that genuinely carry more protein than lentils, starting with one that spent most of history being soaked in seawater to make it edible.